Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man walah wa ba'd. So I get this question put to me actually really frequently. How did you learn the Arabic language? Well, one, I'm still learning. I think the better question is, how did you become proficient enough to pursue your studies in Islam in the Arabic language, right? That would probably be phrasing the question perhaps a little bit better. And what I'll try to do is put it into two groups of advice. One will be non-technical, and one will be a little bit technical in terms of tips. And so the non-technical first, of course, Fadlallahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's just simply, this is one of the favors that Allah Ta'ala bestowed upon me in this life, is generally speaking a love of language. And so not only the Arabic language, but I just love language altogether. I love English. I enjoy greatly reading in the English language. I enjoy reading on etymology. I enjoy reading about literature. And I mean, I love language. At a very young age, I was, again, blessed by Allah to have the internal curiosity and disposition to learn two other languages. One of them was Japanese, which I taught myself at the young age of like 9 or 10 years old. And then the other was Spanish. And then by the time I had gotten to completing high school, I had, at 18, I became a Muslim. And so particularly learning Japanese, I think, helped to sort of massage my brain into accepting a whole nother world, right, of linguistic possibility. So there's that. I mean, obviously, awalan, fadlallahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first and most important one is the favor that Allah gave me. In that, still with the non-technical, feedback, is that one, I have always been by disposition a very curious person. I've always been a nerd. I enjoy studying because it's more of an impulse. It's just something I need to do. And I'm saying this not as a form of self-praise, because again, this is just simply who Allah made me to be. It's just what it's going to be. In fact, I was telling somebody a funny story the other day that when I worked in IT, I got in trouble one month with my boss. If Kathy, if you see this, you may give it a laugh. And so I got in trouble one time with my boss because, we like many people in IT, right? When you're not doing something, you're futzing around the computer, and so you might be looking at this or that. Well, of course, what was I doing in any off time that I had is I was downloading books, right? Different so-called Islamic books, right? And so I think 1 month I had downloaded like a terabyte of data. And so I got called into my boss's office and was like, "What in the HE double hockey sticks are you doing? That you could, what are you downloading?" Right? And because she didn't write, she's looking at these files. She's like, "What is this stuff?" I'm like, just some books. And so I say this, that I have a natural, deep need to study. Now, some people have that, some people don't. I do believe that sometimes that can be acquired. And again, maybe not to the same level, but certainly it can be acquired. And I know that learning language, even when there is a desire, say, for the subject, if learning the language seems very like just like an obstacle course, and you get just tired of jumping over hoops. And there does become also what I feel like is the sort of beginner's fatigue, where people get trapped in the limbo of Arabic 101. And that could go, Islam 101, Arabic 101, like you just keep studying the same basic stuff over and over and over. And so that can create a sort of defeatist attitude. And I understand, that's certainly not fun to be stuck in that mode for forever. And so again, the wide-ranging non-technical is that, one, I just happen to be a nerd. I happen to love to study. I love writing. And so I have actually kind of taken this up again as a means of practice. So like on my Twitter account, I've been making it the intention to actually write a number of my tweets in Arabic, not as a form of riya, as most people, try to accuse you, right? But just simply, it's important that at some point in one's development of a language, English, right? Well, even when we're just talking about our native tongue as speakers of English, writing becomes a very important part of that journey, so that you learn to express yourself, right? You express your thoughts. And so I've kind of made it a habit again that, like some of my tweets will be in Arabic and some of them will be in English, or I'll do it bilingual, right? Because I want to continue to practice expressing myself. Because sure, like professionally, like as an imam, I spend a lot of time reading, obviously. In fact, if you, right, I mean, you can look right here alone, right? I just got this massive stack of stuff, and, I'm trying to make my way through, right? And so professionally speaking, I'm always reading. But that's, that's great. I love it. But that tends to be, right, that's just, I'm reading other people's thoughts. And so writing at some point becomes a necessary component of my own growth, development in Arabic, versus just simply consuming. I need to also produce. And so the other day I had written something, and somebody had said, oh, you should have written it like this or like that. And, it'd be more expressed. And while there are certainly true that there is a way that you can write in a language that is, say, stylistically appropriate for that language. At the same time, undoubtedly, I'm an American, and so the way that I think is going to impact that. And there are actually whole books on Nahu, right? There are whole books on grammar that will discuss this as like a sub sort of philosophy topic, right? About the influence of the Ajam on the language and the various thought processes that they brought into the language over the years, particularly given that some of the biggest speakers, biggest scholars of the Arabic language were of non-Arab extraction. And so like one of my teachers, when I showed it to him, he said, no, this is fine. He said, I understood everything you said. I also knew that this was not written by an Arab. I could tell that this was a thought that developed of somebody who was not born an Arab, but there was nothing wrong with it. It was completely, intelligible. So I say that, what can you do to develop your curiosity? That's a very elusive one. And so in lieu of development of curiosity, or hopefully we can muster the bare minimum of curiosity, right, to kind of get the engine to turn over, then what are now some, say, practical and technical tips that you can do? So one, try to deal with it every day. Try to read something in the Arabic language every day. Again, I'm an imam, so I kind of have to. And one reason why I like to read so much is that from across different things, I'll give you, I'll just show you a little something here that I have in my calendar, on Google Calendar here. And I made this for myself. This is just currently what I want to read through right now. And actually, this isn't even complete, but this is just what I have in my calendar. So if you take a look here, For instance, you will see that, okay, when I wake up in the morning, right? Well, a couple days of the week, I teach a class on tajweed, and then I have my own hifd review that I do right after Fajr, and then I'm reading currently a book on Usul al-Fiqh by Muhammad Abu Zahra, and then there's a book on Sarf that I'm reading by a scholar, and then there's a book by Sheikh At-Tayyar, Hafidhahullah, which is an explanation, Sharh Muqaddimah to Usul al-Tafsir, right? And so he goes into a book about the principles of tafsir, and then there's another one, Ma'rifatu Ulum al-Hadith by Sheikh Al-Auni, Hafidhahullah, which is like a introduction book on the sciences of hadith that I'm reading, because I would actually like to maybe teach this later in the fall. And then I have another book on Nahu, both the book on grammar and morphology. The book on Nahu and Sarf is by As-Samra'i. And then I have another one on the Al-Muhadhab من الفقه المالكي وعدته by Al-Majjaji, which is a book on Maliki fiqh with its proofs. And then I have another one, which is a combination of a short work that includes the usul of the madhab of Imam Malik, as well as some other pieces on it. So that's the Haqiba Ta'hil fi Fiqh ala al-Madhab Imam Malik. It was a gift from a friend of mine. I'm reading through that. And then another one, Al-Muqaddimah fi Fiqh al-Maliki by Al-Habib bin Tahir, Hafidhahullah, who is like a giant Maliki scholar out of North Africa. And then I have my prep that I do for my tafsir class. So then I'm reading usually Ibn Juzay and Tafsir As-Sa'di. And then there's a whole bunch of other books. Now, my point is that if you look at these books, okay, they're also called Islamic studies books. However, the authors are, we're talking about authors that may have been from, over 1,000 years ago to, maybe 300 or 400 years ago to just 50, 60 years ago. And so the language of those are going to be very different. And I have a few, like I have a book I'm reading now about the ulama and the tarikh, the history of the ulama, of the scholars in Andalus. And so that's like a very modern book. That's just biographies of people. That's really interesting. I'm reading many different books, right? And so the point is, I'm also getting a healthy dose of vocabulary. I know that there's a tendency to focus on grammar and morphology, probably in that order. And obviously, you have to know some grammar. If you don't know what is jumla fi'aliyah and jumla ismiya, and what is a harf and what is a kalim, like if you don't know basic elements of Arabic grammar, well then obviously, that's going to be problematic. That being said, in the beginning, I believe, and again, this is just sharing my personal view, that the acquisition of the qawa'id of Nahu should actually be somewhat attenuated by the acquisition and the memorization of vocabulary. And so you have some students that will be very, very familiar with different qaida or different rules of grammar and this or that, but they really struggle when they open up the book because they just aren't familiar with the vocabulary words. And so what's beautiful is that you say like, well, man, why are you reading like 5 different books on Maliki fiqh and 3 different books on usul and such and such and such? Well, one, what I find is that actually reading those different books, because they're all kind of talking about the same subject, they will talk about it, but also from slightly different angles. And so I will build up a bit more capacity in my ability to read on that subject while also broadening, right, my vocabulary within that subject. And then when I go from usul to, the history of Andalus to some other book, right, then I'm going completely different, subject matter. And so again, I'm really, really doing what I can to expand my vocabulary. And then again, when I write, when I put my own thoughts in, right, and you will learn this especially as you begin to take your thoughts in English and put them into Arabic, you're going to find like, man, I don't know what that word is. Or what is the word for this? And what is the word for that? And so as you do that more, you will build up a greater familiarity merely with the vocabulary. And so I say in the beginning, not in the end, and obviously not for the case of like ma'ani or, not for the case of like, if you're going to read tafsir, but just as a general rule, to know what the word means, but maybe not know, is it past tense? Is it future tense? Is it right? That's secondary. It's just important. What the heck does the word mean? And then as your grammar builds and you're able to, okay, right? I think, in my opinion, that's more important. So I have one quick little thing here I would share that I know is a little bit difficult in the beginning for people. And that is something quick with grammar as it relates to verb and subject. So I wrote this out here really quick. Hopefully you can see this fairly decently. I know there is some reflection that you're getting there, but it's as good as it's going to get, I guess. So I have here a very simple sentence with the verb kataba, which means to write, with a subject, al-imam, and with where applicable, a direct object, right, al-khitab, right, like a letter or a speech. So I'm going to go through 4 different voicings, what we call, right, the present tense and the past tense, and then also what we refer to as when the implicit and the explicit, and I'll go through some of the Arabic terminology really quick. So as you can see in the first example, in the first sentence, كتب الإمام الخطاب. كتب الإمام الخطاب. Okay, so this would be the equivalent of wrote, meaning it's past tense, the doer of the action is known, and the action is complete. كتب, right? All voicings of this, and I'm using a simple tripart verb here, right? No weak vowels and all that letters or whatnot. No, making it easy, right? كتب الإمام الخطاب. And so the imam, the imam wrote and finished, right? It's done. The action is done. The imam wrote the letter. And then now we have in the present tense, يكتب الإمام الخطاب. In both of these cases, al-khitab is maf'ul bih. It's going to be the direct object, right? So كتب الإمام الخطاب or كتب الإمام الخطاب. And so that's simple. كتب and يكتب. Now, yes, as you proceed, that is just one of the areas of elbow grease that you'll have to work and do a little bit of both rote memorization and just elbow grease and doing some just the more you read, the more you practice. Is people say, well, how do you know when you go from fi'l al-madi to al-fi'l al-mudari', when you go from the past tense to the present tense? How do you know where to conjugate that verb? Is it yahsabu, yahsibu, yaktubu? How do you know what that second letter voweling is going to be? Some of that is just going to be practice. So in this case, what yaktubu al-imam al-khitab. So the imam writes or is writing the letter or the speech. And so if you want to, you could switch the verb and the subject, al-imam yaktubu al-khitab, right, to put a bit more emphasis on, right, the here and now, right? So the imam is writing the letter, right, versus yaktubu al-imam al-khitab. It could also imply that this is not so much something that the imam is doing right at this moment, but is something that the imam does in general, right? In the present tense, but just in general. Now, we get, and those are what we call al-ma'lum, right? These two, this is where we call them al-ma'lum, right? Because what? The subject is known. Now, these two will be al-majhul, where the subject and the doer is anonymous. And so you may be familiar with the term jahal or jahil, right? Jahal is ignorance, jahil, like an ignorant person. And of course, jahili or jahiliya, right, referring to the time before Islam, the ignorance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so kutiba al-khitab. You notice the flipping or the changing of the harakat, right? Kutiba al-khitabu, right? So now it was written. And so we're talking about, and actually, well, I'll get to this in a second, right? We're going to be talking about where there actually is going to be both a majhul and a ma'loom aspect. There's going to be one aspect that is unknown, but there is another aspect that is very important that is known. So in this case, kutib al-khitab, right? The speech or the letter was written. So now we're talking about the letter, but we're talking about its formulation, its creation. It's right now is what? It's in the past. It's in the past. Now, in the present tense, and this is where it gets tough, especially when you're reading books where there's no, as we say, tashkil, right? There's no fatha, dhamma, kasra, sukun, all that stuff, right? It does get a little bit challenging. But again, time, diligence, and a lot of elbow grease will help to rectify that. So, yuktabu al-khitab, right? Yuktabu. Now look at the present passive and the present active. Yaktubu, yuktabu, right? The only difference is the first letter goes from a fatha to a dhamma, right? And then the second letter in the jadr, what goes from a dhamma to a fatha. So yuktabu. We're still talking about the letter that was what we're talking about it now in the present tense, but its action is completed. Yuktabu al-khitab. The letter is written. Right? The letter is written versus the letter was written. And so that's why this would be al-fi'l al-mudari' lil-majhul. Right? This would be the present tense passive. Now, what is it that's unknown in these two? Right? Al-fa'il, the subject of the sentence. We don't know who did the writing. But we do know what was done. Right? And so even though there is a majhul of the fa'il, right, the subject, but however, the fi'il is ma'loom. The action is known. And so therefore, and this is now where we get into kind of the field of ma'ani, of meanings, is that once we remove the al-fa'al al-ma'lum, once we remove the subject, and that subject is not known, it puts an incredible emphasis on the action. And so it doesn't really matter in terms of when, it doesn't matter in terms of where, but it does matter that it is, right, either in this case, it has been done, or as I will give one example, like in the Quran, it will happen, la rayba fi. So for instance, we take the beginning of several of the surah from the end of at the end of the Quran in Juz' Amma, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ. So when Allah Ta'ala, when we read this and we see that Allah is talking about إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, the emphasis is, and is also, there's a bit of dread here as well. Well, when the sun is wound up, right? Well, who's going to do the winding too? I mean, obviously it's sort of like, who's going to get it, right? When you're a kid, like, when your parents would warn you, somebody's going to get it if they don't clean their room. Like, you're like, well, who's somebody? I know who somebody is. It's me, right? And I know who's going to do the getting. It's going to be you. It's like, it'll be mom and dad, right? And so it places an emphasis on the action, right? And because, especially with something like the sun, which every single day we get up, every human being that has ever lived on this earth has waken up in the morning and looked up at the sky, there's the sun. But one day that is not going to be the case. And so it puts an incredible emphasis on that. And so learning to discern between the past and the present, al-madi wal-mudari', and then, right, and we have those two voicings, right, kataba and yaktubu. And then we have the two voicings for the majhul, right, kutiba wa yuktabu, It was written, and it is written. The fourth one that I mentioned, what يكتب الخطاب. This is a common one that people will write in, right? Is written, is studied, is abrogated, is, right? Is, and then a past tense reference. Is, and a past tense reference, right? This is a very common form. And so when you're reading without the tashkil, you really have to pay close attention to the words that both precede and follow to get an idea of what the voicing is like. And again, spending time reading from a wide variety of sources as much as your ability allows. And here's the thing, I'll leave this as the last little bit. There are so many wonderful YouTube videos that you can listen to, right? Because listening is an important part. And now there's all these great books that are put out that are bilingual. In fact, if I remember correctly, I'm going to check here on YouTube. Sister Aisha Bewley over in the UK translated a work of, I think it was the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani. Now, if I can find it here, because there's two versions of it. So let me see here if I can bring this up before I let you go, right? So here is, come on now, where is it? Well, is this the bilingual edition? Maybe if I put in Risala bilingual. So anyway, obviously the big hint is she put out a translation of the Muqaddimah, of the introduction to Ibn Abi Zayd's book, Ar-Risala, and there is a bilingual edition. I don't know, you can poke around on Amazon and try to look for it. I know it's in there somewhere. But anyway, there are many books that are written now that are like these bilingual editions. And so those can greatly aid you and help you. And if you can't find the bilingual edition of it, you can just get the translation, and then you can go to my friend Jarir on his website or give him a call. He has the little pocket version of the Risala. So for those of you that are, just trying to learn, he has a pocket version of the Risala. And you can find it from him or maybe from some other people, right? But the nice part about this little pocket version of the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd is that it is mutaharrika, right? So you can see that it has all of the vowel markings. And so you could pick up the Risala that has the translation, and then you can read this with all of the markings in it, and you can kind of slowly help to reverse engineer your way. As a matter of fact, if you could probably read this, really master its vocabulary, as well as the grammar rules that are in here. Because here's the beautiful thing about the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd, rahimahullah, is that he wrote this when he was young, and he wrote it mainly for kids, right? And so it's a very digestible language. And so if you can just do those two things, the Mutaharrika Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, and then also the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd in English by Sister Aisha Bewley, those two alone should keep you busy for a little while. Learn the vocab, right? And then take that vocab, learn to make some of your own sentences right, try to use them, around, I don't know, people speak Arabic or whatever. These are just some tips that I've been giving people to kind of by any means necessary move themselves above Arabic 101. Because it is after a while, it gets to be a little bit frustrating to never move beyond that. And then, of course, most importantly, read the Book of Allah every single day and familiarize yourself with its vocabulary, its grammar, its meanings, inshallah. So I hope that helps. I get asked this a lot. How did you do it? Well, as I said, it's number one, the fadl of Allah that Allah gave me for this, that put a love in me. And then two, I'll just elbow grease, the last 30 years of my life, just reading. And so, like with most things, the more you do it, right, eventually you will trip, stumble, and fall in your way into becoming better at it. So anyway, may Allah Ta'ala وفقنا الله بهذا الأمر إن شاء الله. نسأله التوفيق. Inshallah, we ask for success in this endeavor. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْ أَهْلِ الْقُرْآنِ. May Allah Ta'ala make us from the people of Quran. And so that we are not all. You don't need to be a genius. It's not about genius. It's just simply about a little bit of focused and dedicated work, inshallah. I know that time is scarce, but at the same time, I learned these things when I was young. It's true, before I had a family and kids and all that kind of stuff. But I was working. I was always a working fool. So, like I said, it's not about, you don't have to have 10 hours a day to dedicate to this. But it's just, even if you had 30 minutes every day, but you just never deviate from that. In the same way for me, like I fast every single day. Like today, we have so usually Mondays and Thursdays. I wasn't able to do the Shara'i fast today for another reason, but except for Mondays and Thursdays, which I still do the Shara'i fast. Outside of that, I fast every day 16 hours. You guys know I've been on this IF thing, right? So from 6 p.m., 10 a.m., I fast. And it's amazing when you do the same thing every single day. It's amazing the benefit that you get from it. So, try to make the intention to Allah, to claw and scrape and, drag yourself into doing something with it every single day. وَزَادَكُمُ اللَّهُ نَافِرًا. Inshallah, may Allah Ta'ala, inshallah, increase you in its benefit and make you the people, inshallah, of the Ahl Tanzil al-Quran as well. Make us from the people of the language that the Quran was revealed. وأصلي وأسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. بارك الله فيكم. حياكم الله وبياكم. السلام عليكم.